What if I told you that hidden within the most complex financial revolution of our time lies a story so simple a child could understand it? What if the greatest economic disruption since the invention of money itself could be explained through a tale of forest creatures who refused to accept the world as it was handed to them? This isn't just another story about technology or finance. This is the story of the most audacious heist in history. Except nothing was stolen. Instead, something far more valuable was given away for free: the power to control money itself. In the next 90 minutes, you'll witness a revolution that began with a single, anonymous act of rebellion and grew into a movement that has already begun reshaping our world. You'll meet the mysterious figure whose identity remains unknown despite creating something worth trillions. You'll discover why the most powerful financial institutions on Earth are both terrified and fascinated by what started as a simple idea shared in an online forum. But here's what makes this story truly extraordinary. Everything you're about to hear has already happened. The forest creatures you'll meet? They're real people making real decisions with real consequences right now. The economic revolution unfolding in the Whispering Woods? It's happening in your neighborhood, your country, your world. By the time our story ends, you'll understand not just what cryptocurrency is, but why it exists, how it works, and most importantly, why it might be the most significant development in human civilization since the printing press. You'll also understand why some of the smartest people alive believe we're witnessing the birth of an entirely new form of money, while others are convinced it's the most elaborate delusion ever created. The best part? You don't need to be a mathematician, computer scientist, or economist to grasp it all. You just need to be willing to follow a group of woodland creatures who asked a simple question: what if money worked differently? Their answer changed everything. And once you understand their story, you'll never look at money the same way again. Welcome to the Digital Forest. Your journey into the future of money begins now. Now that you understand what's at stake, let me take you back to where it all began. Not in Silicon Valley boardrooms or Wall Street trading floors, but in a place that might seem surprisingly familiar once you realize what it represents. Picture the most advanced economy you can imagine. One that's been running smoothly for centuries, trusted by millions, backed by the most respected institutions. Now imagine discovering that this entire system was built on a foundation that was slowly cracking beneath everyone's feet. This is the story of the day that foundation finally gave way. Deep within an ancient forest where towering oaks stretched toward endless skies and morning mist danced between fern-covered paths, a remarkable civilization of woodland creatures had developed the most sophisticated economy the natural world had ever witnessed. This wasn't just any forest. This was the Whispering Woods, where squirrels, raccoons, deer, and countless other inhabitants had created a bustling marketplace that would make even the most advanced human cities envious. For generations beyond counting, these forest dwellers had relied on a currency system that seemed as natural as breathing itself: the sacred leaves. These weren't ordinary leaves that fell with autumn's arrival, but specially marked foliage that bore the official seal of the Forest Reserve, a grand institution housed within the hollow of the Great Mother Oak, where the most distinguished badgers in ceremonial vests maintained ledgers thick as tree trunks. The sacred leaves possessed an almost magical quality in the eyes of the forest inhabitants. A young rabbit named Hazel could exchange 3 leaves for a bundle of fresh clover, while a family of chipmunks might trade an entire pouch of leaves for winter storage rights in the premium acorn caves. The system had worked so seamlessly for so long that most creatures never questioned its foundations, until the day everything began to unravel. The Forest Reserve, you see, wielded tremendous power over every aspect of woodland commerce. Picture, if you will, a vast underground network beneath the Mother Oak, where hundreds of badger clerks scurried through tunnels lined with filing systems that cataloged every single leaf transaction in forest history. When young Hazel wanted to purchase that clover bundle, The transaction couldn't simply happen between her and the seller. Instead, a complex process unfolded. The leaves had to be authenticated, registered, processed through multiple departments, and finally recorded in the official ledgers. But here's where the problems began to surface, like mushrooms after a heavy rain. Every time any forest creature made a purchase, the Forest Reserve claimed what they called a processing fee. Sometimes 1 leaf out of every 20, sometimes more during busy seasons. These fees accumulated like fallen timber after a storm, creating enormous wealth for the reserve, while gradually draining resources from ordinary forest dwellers. The delays proved even more frustrating than the fees. A simple purchase that should have taken moments stretched into hours as paperwork wound through bureaucratic channels. If a family of deer in the eastern meadows wanted to buy supplies from vendors in the western thickets, their transaction might require approval from multiple reserve branches, verification from regional supervisors, and coordination between different forest districts, a process that could consume an entire day or more. During peak seasons, when creatures rushed to prepare for winter migrations or spring plantings, the reserve system became so overwhelmed that transactions ground to a virtual halt. Squirrels found themselves unable to purchase the nuts they needed for winter storage, while bird families discovered they couldn't access their own savings when urgent situations arose. Perhaps most troubling of all was the reserve's power to create new sacred leaves whenever they deemed it necessary. The distinguished badgers would announce these decisions with great ceremony, explaining that additional leaves were needed to stimulate forest economic growth or respond to changing seasonal demands. But the forest creatures began to notice that as more leaves entered circulation, each individual leaf seemed to purchase less than it had before. The bundle of clover that once cost 3 leaves gradually rose to 4, then 5, then 6 leaves, a phenomenon the reserve's economists called natural price fluctuation. This inflation crept through the forest economy like ivy climbing a trunk, slowly but inexorably changing everything it touched. Elderly creatures who had saved leaves throughout their entire lives watched their retirement funds lose purchasing power year after year. Young families found themselves needing ever-increasing quantities of leaves to maintain their standard of living, despite working just as hard as previous generations. The reserve's operating hours created additional complications. While the forest economy never slept, nocturnal creatures needed to conduct business during nighttime hours, while diurnal species preferred daylight transactions. The Forest Reserve maintained strict business hours. Emergency purchases during nights, weekends, or seasonal holidays became nearly impossible, leaving creatures stranded when they most needed financial flexibility. Geographical barriers compounded these temporal limitations. The reserve's magnificent headquarters in the Mother Oak served forest dwellers adequately if they lived nearby. But creatures in distant groves, mountain meadows, or riverside communities found themselves traveling enormous distances just to conduct basic financial business. Some remote forest areas remained entirely cut off from the sacred leaf economy, their inhabitants forced to rely on primitive barter systems, while their connected neighbors enjoyed the benefits of modern commerce. Security concerns added yet another layer of complexity to an already strained system. Despite the reserve's impressive authentication procedures, clever counterfeiters occasionally succeeded in creating fake sacred leaves that passed casual inspection. These forgeries didn't just represent theft, they undermined trust in the entire monetary system. Honest merchants found themselves inadvertently accepting worthless counterfeits, while customers grew increasingly suspicious of legitimate transactions. The Forest Reserve's centralized nature created a single point of failure that made the entire economy vulnerable. When diseases affected the Mother Oak, or when political disputes arose among the badger administrators, or when natural disasters disrupted the reserve's operations, the entire forest economy ground to a halt. Creatures who had never questioned the system began to wonder whether such enormous power should rest in the paws of so few. As autumn approached the Whispering Woods, bringing with it the traditional season of economic preparation, a growing number of forest creatures found themselves gathering in small groups beneath ancient trees, sharing stories of frustration and exploring radical alternatives. The conversations that began during these informal meetings would soon transform not just the forest economy, but the very nature of money itself. The first whispers of revolutionary change began, appropriately enough, with the forest's most innovative thinkers. A secretive collective of woodland creatures who called themselves the Digital Grove. These weren't the traditional power brokers of forest society. No distinguished badgers in ceremonial vests or formal economists with advanced degrees from the prestigious Acorn University. Instead, the Digital Grove consisted of curious minds from every species. Tech-savvy raccoons with nimble paws perfect for intricate work. Analytical owls whose night vision allowed them to study problems others couldn't see. Enterprising squirrels whose natural hoarding instincts had evolved into sophisticated resource management skills. And many others who shared a common conviction that the forest deserved a better financial system. The Digital Grove met in the most unlikely of locations. A forgotten grove where ancient trees formed a natural amphitheater, their branches creating a canopy so thick that even the reserve's most sophisticated surveillance couldn't penetrate. Here, surrounded by the gentle sounds of rustling leaves and distant streams, these revolutionary thinkers would debate, experiment, and ultimately design a completely new approach to money that would challenge everything the forest had ever known about commerce. Their breakthrough came from observing something that had always existed in the forest but had never been considered as currency. Seeds. Not just any seeds, mind you, but special digital seeds that would exist in a new kind of reality, a parallel dimension where information itself could take physical form and be traded, stored, and verified by the forest community itself. Unlike the sacred leaves, which required the Forest Reserve's approval for every transaction, these revolutionary seeds would operate according to principles of community consensus. Every creature in the forest would participate in verifying and recording transactions, creating a system where power belonged to everyone rather than accumulating in the paws of a few. The concept was so radical that even the Digital Grove's members initially struggled to comprehend its full implications. The seeds possess characteristics that addressed every major flaw in the sacred leaf system. Most remarkably, transactions occurred directly between parties, without requiring authorization from any central authority. When young Hazel wanted to purchase her clover bundle using seeds, she could complete the transaction immediately with the seller, without involving badger clerks, bureaucratic procedures, or processing delays. The exchange would be verified by the forest community itself, through a process so elegant and secure that it seemed almost magical to creatures accustomed to the reserve's cumbersome procedures. Speed became one of the seed's most celebrated features. While sacred leaf transactions dragged on for hours or days, seed-based purchases completed almost instantaneously. A deer family in the eastern meadows could buy supplies from western thicket vendors faster than a hummingbird's wing beat. International forest commerce, trading with creatures from distant woodland kingdoms beyond the Great Mountains, no longer required complex inter-reserve negotiations or currency conversion fees. The fee structure of seed transactions represented perhaps the most dramatic improvement over the existing system. Instead of the Forest Reserve's substantial processing charges, seed transactions typically required no fees whatsoever. Even during busy periods when the network experienced high volume, any fees remained minimal, tiny fractions compared to the reserve's substantial cuts. This difference meant that creatures could keep nearly all the value they earned, rather than watching significant portions disappear into the reserve's coffers. Accessibility proved another revolutionary advantage. While the Forest Reserve required creatures to travel to specific locations during limited hours, seed transactions could occur anywhere in the forest at any time. A family of nocturnal flying squirrels could conduct business during their natural active hours without being constrained by the reserve's diurnal schedule. Remote forest communities that had been effectively excluded from the modern economy could suddenly participate fully in woodland commerce. The seeds also addressed the inflation problems that had plagued sacred leaf users for generations. Rather than being subject to arbitrary decisions by reserve administrators, many types of seeds operated according to predetermined mathematical rules that limited their total supply. Some seed varieties had absolute maximum quantities that could ever exist, creating scarcity that protected holders from the value erosion that had devastated sacred leaf savings. Security represented perhaps the most impressive innovation in the seed system. While sacred leaves could be counterfeited by clever forgers, the mathematical foundations of seed currency made forgery virtually impossible. Each seed contained unique cryptographic signatures that were exponentially more difficult to fake than any physical authentication system the Reserve had ever developed. The 24/7 availability of seed commerce eliminated the frustration of closed financial institutions. Woodland creatures no longer needed to plan their economic activities around the Reserve's business hours or worry about emergency situations that arose during weekends or holidays. The seed economy never slept, never took vacations, and never closed for maintenance. As word of these remarkable innovations spread through the forest grapevine, reactions varied dramatically across different segments of woodland society. Progressive creatures, particularly younger animals who had grown up frustrated with the Reserve's limitations, embraced the seed concept with enthusiasm that bordered on revolutionary fervor. They organized underground meetups, shared technical knowledge, and began conducting their first experimental seed transactions with the excitement of pioneers exploring uncharted territory. Conservative forest dwellers, especially those who had built careers or accumulated wealth within the sacred leaf system, viewed the seed revolution with deep suspicion. They questioned whether such radical changes were necessary, worried about the stability of unproven technologies, and feared that abandoning established systems might lead to economic chaos. The Forest Reserve itself initially dismissed seeds as a temporary fad that would fade once creatures realized the superior security and reliability of traditional sacred leaf banking. The distinguished badgers issued official statements emphasizing their institution's centuries of trustworthy service and warning against the risks of experimental financial systems. But as autumn deepened into winter and more creatures began experimenting with seed transactions, even skeptics started to notice the undeniable advantages. Stories spread of instant international purchases, of families saving money on fees, of remote communities finally accessing modern commerce, and of economic freedom that previous generations had never imagined possible. The seed revolution had begun, and nothing in the Whispering Woods would ever be the same. So the forest creatures had invented something revolutionary, a form of money that solved every problem they'd faced with the old system. But here's the thing about revolutionary ideas. They're only as good as your ability to make them work in the real world. The forest dwellers were about to discover that creating a new form of money was the easy part. The hard part was figuring out how to keep track of it all without the massive infrastructure they'd just abandoned. They needed a solution that was somehow both completely decentralized and absolutely trustworthy. What they came up with would make the seed currency itself look simple by comparison. As the seed economy gained momentum throughout the winter months, the Digital Grove faced their most complex challenge yet: how to maintain accurate records of every transaction without relying on the Forest Reserve's centralized ledger system. The problem seemed almost insurmountable. For centuries, the Reserve's army of badger clerks had meticulously recorded every sacred leaf transaction in their massive underground filing systems. Without similar record-keeping infrastructure, how could the forest community possibly track billions of seed exchanges between countless creatures? The solution that emerged would prove to be even more revolutionary than the seeds themselves: a community-based record-keeping system that distributed responsibility across the entire forest population. Instead of concentrating all financial records in one location under the control of a few administrators, every creature would maintain their own copy of a universal transaction ledger. This concept challenged fundamental assumptions about information management that had guided forest society for millennia. Imagine, if you will, a leather-bound book so comprehensive that it contained the details of every seed transaction that had ever occurred in the forest. Now imagine that instead of one such book locked away in the reserve's vault, thousands of identical copies existed throughout the woodland, each maintained by ordinary creatures who updated their records whenever new transactions occurred. This distributed ledger concept would ensure that no single institution could control or manipulate financial records, while providing transparency that far exceeded anything the reserve had ever offered. The system worked through an ingenious process of community verification. Whenever any creature wanted to conduct a seed transaction, they would announce their intention to the forest network. Specialized record keepers, drawn from volunteers throughout the woodland, would verify the transaction's validity by checking that the sender actually possessed the seeds they claimed to be trading and that all mathematical calculations were correct. These verification specialists became known as ledger keepers, and their role would prove crucial to the entire system's success. The ledger keepers emerged from every corner of forest society, but they shared certain characteristics that made them particularly suited to this vital work. Many were naturally detail-oriented creatures, meticulous beavers who had spent their lives engineering complex dam systems, precise woodpeckers whose survival depended on exact measurements, methodical badgers who had grown frustrated with the reserve's inefficiencies, and analytical owls whose nocturnal schedules allowed them to process transactions during off-peak hours. These volunteers discovered that their record-keeping work provided benefits beyond simple community service. The system rewarded accurate verification with small quantities of newly created seeds, creating economic incentives for maintaining the ledger's integrity. The more transactions a ledger keeper successfully verified, the more seeds they earned, but only if their work met the community's exacting standards for accuracy and honesty. The verification process itself resembled a sophisticated form of communal problem-solving that drew upon the forest's collective intelligence. When transactions were submitted for recording, multiple ledger keepers would independently verify the same exchanges, comparing their results to ensure accuracy. If discrepancies arose, the community would investigate until consensus emerged. This redundant checking system made errors or fraud exponentially more difficult than in the centralized reserve system, where mistakes or corruption by a single administrator could affect thousands of accounts. Transaction records were organized into blocks, comprehensive collections of verified exchanges that were permanently added to the community ledger once completed. Each block contained hundreds or thousands of individual transactions, along with special mathematical codes that connected it to previous blocks in an unbreakable chain. This blockchain structure meant that altering historical records would require changing every subsequent block, a task that became more impossible with each passing day. The mathematical complexity of these connecting codes served multiple security purposes. Like passwords that even their creators couldn't remember, these codes had to be discovered through intensive computational work, rather than simply being assigned. Ledger keepers competed to solve these mathematical puzzles, with successful solvers earning the right to add new blocks to the chain and receiving seed rewards for their efforts. This competition created what the Digital Grove called proof of work, verification that substantial computational effort had been invested in maintaining the ledger's security. The system ensured that tampering with records would require more computational power than the honest community possessed, making fraud economically unfeasible, even for the most determined criminals. The security implications impressed even the most skeptical forest creatures. Unlike the reserve's centralized records, which could be altered or destroyed by compromising a single location, the distributed ledger existed in thousands of copies, maintained by independent volunteers. Even if natural disasters, political upheavals, or technical failures affected some record keepers, the remaining copies would preserve complete transaction history. Transparency reached levels that previous generations had never imagined possible. While the reserve's ledgers remained closely guarded secrets, accessible only to authorized Badger administrators, every creature could examine the complete blockchain at any time. This openness allowed independent verification of the system's integrity and made hidden manipulation virtually impossible. The blockchain's immutable nature provided unprecedented security for long-term record storage. Once transactions were incorporated into the chain and verified by the community, they became permanent fixtures that couldn't be altered without detection. This permanence gave creatures confidence that their financial history would be preserved accurately regardless of political changes, institutional failures, or technological disruptions. Privacy considerations received careful attention in the system's design. While transaction details were publicly visible, the identities of participants remained pseudonymous. Creatures could conduct business without revealing their personal information, yet the community could still verify that all exchanges were legitimate and properly authorized. The spring arrived in the Whispering Woods, bringing with it the traditional season of renewed economic activity. The blockchain system had evolved into a sophisticated infrastructure that handled thousands of transactions daily. The distributed ledger had grown to enormous size, yet remained manageable because responsibility was shared across the entire forest community. Word of the blockchain's success spread beyond the forest borders, attracting attention from woodland communities throughout the region. Delegations of curious creatures arrived from distant groves to study the system and consider implementing similar approaches in their own economies. The Whispering Woods had become an inadvertent testing ground for revolutionary financial technologies that might transform commerce across the entire woodland world. But even as the blockchain proved its reliability and security, new challenges were emerging that would test the system's resilience and adaptability in ways its creators had never anticipated. By now, you might be thinking, this all sounds too good to be true. A perfect record-keeping system maintained by volunteers? A financial network with no central authority that somehow stays secure and organized? You're right to be skeptical, because what I haven't told you yet is how much work it takes to make this magic happen. The blockchain doesn't run on good intentions. It runs on something much more concrete and costly. The forest creatures were about to discover that their revolutionary system required a new kind of workforce entirely, and this workforce would reshape their entire economy in ways they never expected. As spring blossomed throughout the Whispering Woods, transforming the forest floor into a carpet of wildflowers and filling the air with the songs of returning migrants, a new profession emerged that would fundamentally reshape woodland society. Seed mining. The creatures who chose this path weren't traditional miners in the sense of badgers digging tunnels or moles excavating underground chambers. Instead, they were computational specialists who dedicated their time and energy to solving the complex mathematical puzzles that secured the blockchain and earned newly created seeds as rewards. The mining revolution began quietly, with individual creatures setting up small operations in clearings throughout the forest. A family of industrious beavers converted their dam's water wheel to power computing equipment, channeling the flowing stream's energy into mathematical calculations. A community of raccoons established a mining cooperative in an abandoned bear cave, their nimble paws perfect for maintaining the delicate equipment required for intensive computational work. Even some former Forest Reserve employees, disillusioned with the old system's limitations, left their prestigious positions to join the mining frontier. These pioneers discovered that successful mining required more than just computational power. It demanded deep understanding of the blockchain's mathematical foundations, strategic thinking about resource allocation, and the patience to persist through long periods of problem-solving without guaranteed results. Unlike traditional forest occupations that provided predictable daily wages, mining offered the possibility of substantial rewards, balanced against the risk of extended periods with no income whatsoever. The mathematical puzzles that miners worked to solve served multiple crucial functions in the seed economy's infrastructure. Each puzzle's solution proved that substantial computational work had been invested in verifying transaction blocks, creating the security foundation that made the entire system trustworthy. The puzzles were designed to be extremely difficult to solve, but easy for the community to verify once a solution was discovered, like asking someone to find a needle in a haystack while being able to confirm instantly whether they had succeeded. Mining operations varied dramatically in scale and sophistication. Some individual creatures worked with basic equipment in small forest clearings, solving puzzles through patient persistence and clever optimization of their limited resources. Others formed mining pools, collaborative arrangements where groups of miners combine their computational power to solve puzzles more frequently, sharing the rewards proportionally among all participants. The largest mining operations resembled technological marvels that would have seemed impossible just a few seasons earlier. In a valley beyond the eastern meadows, a consortium of entrepreneurial squirrels had constructed a mining facility powered by an array of wind turbines and solar collectors. Their operation employed dozens of creatures in specialized roles: systems administrators who optimized computational efficiency, security specialists who protected against theft or sabotage, and logistics coordinators who managed the complex supply chains required to keep mining equipment operational. The economic dynamics of mining created fascinating incentive structures that aligned individual profit motives with community security needs. As more miners joined the network, the mathematical puzzles automatically adjusted their difficulty levels to maintain consistent block creation times. This self-regulating mechanism ensured that the blockchain remained secure and stable, regardless of how much computational power the mining community possessed. Competition among miners drove rapid technological innovation throughout the forest. Early mining operations relied on general-purpose computing equipment adapted from other applications. But dedicated mining hardware soon emerged that offered dramatically improved efficiency. Specialized devices appeared that consumed less energy while providing more computational power, creating economic advantages for miners who invested in cutting-edge technology. The environmental implications of large-scale mining operations became a source of intense debate throughout the forest community. The computational work required for blockchain security consumed substantial amounts of energy, leading to increased demand for electricity generation. Some mining operations relied on renewable energy sources like flowing streams, wind patterns, or solar collection, while others used fossil fuel generators that produced pollution and contributed to climate change concerns. Forward-thinking mining entrepreneurs began exploring innovative solutions to environmental challenges. Geothermal mining operations tapped into natural hot springs to power their equipment. Waste heat recovery systems captured the thermal energy produced by intensive computing and redirected it toward useful applications like heating community buildings or supporting agricultural projects. Some miners formed partnerships with renewable energy developers, creating symbiotic relationships that advanced both industries simultaneously. The geographic distribution of mining operations reflected complex economic calculations about energy costs, climate conditions, and regulatory environments. Regions with abundant renewable energy sources became attractive locations for environmentally conscious mining operations. Areas with stable political systems and favorable legal frameworks drew investors seeking predictable, long-term returns. Remote locations with low land costs attracted miners willing to accept reduced connectivity in exchange for cheaper operational expenses. Mining pool dynamics created new forms of economic cooperation that transcended traditional forest social structures. Creatures from different species, geographic regions, and socioeconomic backgrounds found common cause in collaborative mining ventures. A pool might include urban raccoons with advanced technical skills, rural deer families with access to renewable energy sources, and nomadic bird species who contributed portable mining equipment during seasonal migrations. The rewards from successful mining extended beyond immediate financial benefits. Miners earned newly created seeds, but they also gained deep understanding of blockchain technology, valuable technical skills, and positions of influence in the emerging digital economy. Many successful miners became advisors, consultants, or entrepreneurs who helped other creatures navigate the transition from sacred leaf to seed-based commerce. Mining difficulty adjustments created economic cycles that taught the forest community important lessons about market dynamics and long-term planning. During periods when seed values were high, new miners entered the field attracted by potential profits. This increased competition raised mining difficulty and reduced individual rewards, eventually causing less efficient operations to shut down. These boom and bust cycles helped establish sustainable equilibrium levels for mining activity, while demonstrating the self-correcting nature of market forces. The mining revolution also produced unexpected social changes throughout the forest. Traditional hierarchies based on species, age, or inherited wealth became less relevant as technical competence and entrepreneurial initiative gained importance. Young creatures with natural aptitude for mathematics and technology found themselves earning more than established professionals from previous generations. Remote forest communities that had been economically marginalized suddenly gained access to global markets through their mining operations. Security considerations required mining operations to develop sophisticated protective measures against theft, sabotage, and cyber attacks. Mining facilities became fortresses equipped with physical security systems, electronic surveillance, and cybersecurity protocols that rivaled those of the forest reserve itself. The valuable seeds earned through mining created tempting targets for criminals, spurring innovations in protective technologies that benefited the entire forest community. As summer approached its peak, the mining industry had matured from experimental hobby to essential infrastructure that supported the entire seed economy. The distributed nature of mining operations meant that no single entity could control the blockchain, preserving the decentralized principles that had motivated the original revolution against centralized sacred leaf banking. At this point, you understand the individual pieces, the revolutionary currency, the distributed record-keeping, the mining that secures it all. But here's where the story gets really interesting. What the forest creatures had created wasn't just a new payment system. It was something far more profound. They had built a new kind of truth itself, a way of establishing facts that didn't depend on any authority or institution. To understand why this matters so much, we need to zoom out and see the full scope of what they had accomplished. By midsummer, when the forest canopy had reached its full verdant glory and the woodland economy hummed with unprecedented activity, the blockchain had evolved into something far more sophisticated than its creators had originally envisioned. What began as a simple method for recording seed transactions had grown into an intricate tapestry of interconnected blocks that told the complete economic story of the Whispering Woods. Every purchase, every trade, every financial relationship woven together in an unbreakable chain of mathematical certainty. To truly understand the blockchain's elegance, one must imagine it as a vast library where every book is connected to the next in an unbreakable sequence. Each block resembled a comprehensive volume containing thousands of transaction records, but unlike ordinary books, these volumes possessed unique mathematical fingerprints that linked them irrevocably to their predecessors and successors. The fingerprint of each block was calculated using information from all the transactions it contained, plus the fingerprint of the previous block. creating a chain where altering any single link would immediately reveal tampering to the entire forest community. The mathematical foundations of this linking system drew upon cryptographic principles that made forgery virtually impossible. Each block's fingerprint emerged from complex calculations that combined transaction data in ways that seemed almost magical to creatures unfamiliar with advanced mathematics. Even tiny changes to historical records would produce completely different fingerprints, cascading through every subsequent block and immediately alerting the community to attempted fraud. The blockchain's growth pattern reflected the increasing sophistication of the forest economy. Early blocks were relatively small, containing simple transactions as creatures experimented with seed-based commerce. As confidence grew and adoption expanded, blocks became larger and more complex, incorporating advanced transaction types like multi-party exchanges, time-locked payments, and conditional transfers that executed automatically when predetermined conditions were met. The distributed nature of blockchain storage created unprecedented resilience against data loss or manipulation. Unlike the forest reserve's centralized ledgers, which existed in a single vulnerable location, thousands of identical blockchain copies spread throughout the forest. Each copy was maintained by dedicated volunteers who continuously synchronized their records with the broader network, ensuring that the loss of any individual copy wouldn't affect the system's integrity. The synchronization process itself demonstrated remarkable technological sophistication. When new blocks were created, they propagated through the forest network like ripples expanding across a pond's surface. Each record keeper received the new information, verified its mathematical validity, and incorporated it into their local blockchain copy. This process typically completed within minutes, ensuring that the entire forest community shared the same authoritative record of all transactions. The blockchain's transparency revolutionized forest commerce by creating accountability levels that previous generations could never have imagined. While individual identities remained pseudonymous, all transaction details were publicly visible, allowing independent verification of the system's integrity. Researchers could analyze spending patterns, economists could study market trends, and regulators could monitor compliance with forest laws, all without compromising individual privacy. The immutable nature of blockchain records provided unprecedented security for long-term financial planning. Once transactions were incorporated into the chain and confirmed by multiple blocks, they became permanent features that couldn't be altered even by the most powerful authorities. This permanence gave creatures confidence in making long-term contracts, investments, and commitments that had been risky under the old sacred leaf system's vulnerability to administrative manipulation. Smart contracts emerged as one of the blockchain's most innovative applications. These were self-executing agreements embedded directly into the blockchain code, automatically enforcing contract terms without requiring trust between parties or intervention by third-party arbitrators. A smart contract might automatically transfer payment when goods were delivered, release escrow funds when project milestones were completed, or distribute inheritance according to predetermined schedules. The development of smart contracts created new possibilities for complex commercial arrangements that had been impractical under traditional systems. Multi-party business ventures could operate according to automatically enforced profit-sharing agreements. Insurance policies could automatically pay claims when blockchain-verified conditions were met. International trade agreements could execute without requiring expensive legal intermediaries or currency conversion services. The blockchain's programmable nature allowed for continuous evolution and improvement through community consensus. Unlike the Forest Reserve's rigid procedures that required extensive bureaucratic processes to modify, the blockchain could incorporate new features and capabilities through mathematical protocols that were tested, debated, and implemented by the distributed community of users and developers. Scalability challenges emerged as the blockchain's popularity grew exponentially. The system that had efficiently handled a few dozen daily transactions now processed thousands per hour, creating technical challenges that required innovative solutions. Layer 2 scaling solutions appeared, additional systems built on top of the main blockchain that could handle high-frequency transactions while periodically settling final balances on the primary chain. The economic implications of blockchain technology extended far beyond simple payment processing. The system created new forms of digital scarcity, enabled programmable money with built-in logic, and facilitated global commerce without traditional banking intermediaries. These capabilities supported entirely new business models and economic relationships that had been impossible under previous technological constraints. Governance questions arose as the blockchain community grew larger and more diverse. Decisions about system upgrades, security improvements, and feature additions required coordination among thousands of independent participants with varying interests and technical expertise. Governance mechanisms evolved that balanced democratic participation with technical competence, ensuring that important decisions received broad community input while maintaining the system's technical integrity. The blockchain's success attracted attention from neighboring forest kingdoms, creating opportunities for interforest commerce that had been prohibitively complex under traditional banking systems. Cross-border transactions that previously required weeks of bureaucratic processing could now complete in minutes, opening new markets and creating economic opportunities that transcended traditional geographic boundaries. Educational initiatives emerged to help forest creatures understand and participate effectively in the blockchain economy. Technical workshops taught mining and programming skills, while community centers offered courses in digital literacy and cybersecurity. These educational programs helped ensure that the benefits of blockchain technology were accessible to creatures from all backgrounds and experience levels. As autumn approached once again, marking the first anniversary of the seed economy's emergence, the blockchain had proven its resilience, security, and utility through a full cycle of seasonal economic changes. The system that had begun as an experimental alternative to sacred leaf banking had matured into essential infrastructure supporting a thriving digital economy that offered unprecedented freedom, security, and opportunity to all forest dwellers. Now we come to the most intriguing mystery in our entire story. You've seen how the seed economy transformed the forest, how the blockchain revolutionized record-keeping, how mining created new industries and opportunities. But there's one question we haven't answered yet. Perhaps the most important question of all. Who started this revolution? Who was the genius behind the innovation that changed everything? The forest creatures thought they knew, but they were about to discover that some secrets are designed to stay hidden forever. In the depths of the forest archives, hidden within the oldest hollow of the great mother oak where even the Forest Reserve's most senior badgers rarely ventured, ancient scrolls contained fragmentary references to a legend that would become one of woodland folklore's greatest mysteries. The story spoke of a visionary creature known only by the cryptic name Satoshi Nakamoto, the architect of the seed economy whose true identity remained shrouded in enigma even as their revolutionary creation transformed forest society. The legend of Satoshi Nakamoto began with the earliest seed transactions, when the first experimental blocks were added to what would become the mighty blockchain. Historical records showed that these initial blocks contained a mysterious message embedded within their mathematical structure. The time has come for creatures to control their own economic destiny, free from the arbitrary whims of centralized institutions. This statement, written in an elegant script that combined elements from multiple forest dialects, became known as the Genesis message, the philosophical foundation upon which the entire seed economy was built. Scholars who studied the early blockchain data discovered fascinating clues about Satoshi Nakamoto's background and motivations. The mathematical techniques used in the system's design drew upon advanced cryptographic knowledge that suggested formal education in the most prestigious institutions of woodland learning. Yet the practical implementations showed intimate familiarity with the everyday challenges faced by ordinary forest creatures. A combination of academic sophistication and grassroots understanding that was remarkably rare among the forest's intellectual elite. The name itself sparked countless theories and investigations. Sativa, some researchers noted, derived from ancient forest languages meaning cultivated or planted with intention, while Nakamura appeared to combine words meaning middle village or central community. These linguistic clues suggested a creator who saw themselves as a bridge between different forest communities, someone who understood both technical innovation and social transformation. Multiple creatures throughout forest history claimed to be the true Sativa Nakamura, each presenting elaborate evidence to support their assertions. A reclusive badger mathematician from the Northern Territories emerged with complex proofs demonstrating his expertise in the cryptographic techniques underlying the blockchain. A collaborative group of raccoon programmers insisted they had jointly developed the system under the Nakamura pseudonym. Even some former Forest Reserve officials claimed to be whistleblowers who had created the seed economy to expose their institution's corruption. However, forensic analysis of the early blockchain code revealed characteristics that made these claims highly improbable. The programming style showed consistent patterns that suggested a single author rather than collaborative development. The mathematical innovations demonstrated expertise levels that few creatures possessed, while the system's elegant simplicity indicated design genius that transcended ordinary technical competence. Most tellingly, the creator's continued anonymity, despite the enormous fame and fortune that revelation would bring, suggested motivations that remained purely idealistic rather than self-serving. The mystery deepened when researchers discovered that Sativa Nakamura had gradually faded from active participation in the blockchain's development. Early records showed regular communications from the creator, explaining technical decisions and responding to community questions. But as the system matured and attracted broader adoption, these interactions became less frequent, before eventually ceasing entirely. The creator appeared to have deliberately stepped back from their creation, allowing the forest community to take full ownership of the technology they had unleashed. Some forest philosophers interpreted Sativa Nakamura's disappearance as a profound statement about the nature of decentralized systems. By removing themselves from positions of authority or influence, the creator ensured that no single individual could control or manipulate the blockchain's evolution. This selfless act transformed the seed economy from a personal invention into a true community asset that belonged to all forest dwellers equally. Conspiracy theories flourished in the absence of definitive answers about the creator's identity. Some creatures believed Sativa Nakamura was actually a collective pseudonym used by a secret society of reform-minded Forest Reserve insiders who had grown disgusted with their institution's corruption. Others suggested the creator was a time traveler from a future forest civilization who had returned to plant the seeds of economic revolution. The most exotic theories proposed that Sativa Nakamura wasn't a forest creature at all, but rather an artificial intelligence or interdimensional being who had gifted advanced technology to woodland society. The economic implications of the creator's anonymity extended far beyond mere curiosity. Traditional monetary systems depended heavily on trust in their founding institutions and maintaining authorities. The fact that the seed economy functioned perfectly despite, or perhaps because of, its creator's unknown identity demonstrated the power of mathematical consensus over institutional authority. Creatures didn't need to trust Sativa Nakamura. They only needed to verify the mathematical proofs underlying each blockchain transaction. Academic conferences throughout the woodland region featured heated debates about the Nakamura mystery. Cryptographic experts analyzed code structures, searching for stylistic fingerprints that might reveal the creator's background. Linguistic specialists studied the Genesis message and early communications for dialect patterns that could indicate geographic origins. Social scientists explored the philosophical implications of anonymous innovation and its effects on technological adoption. The search for Sativa Nakamura became something of a cottage industry in itself, with professional investigators, amateur sleuths, and fortune hunters all pursuing various leads and theories. Rewards offered for information about the creator's identity reached enormous values, yet none of the countless investigations produced conclusive evidence. The mystery seemed to deepen rather than resolve as time passed, and the blockchain's success made the question of its origins even more intriguing. Some creators argued that the obsession with identifying Satoshi Nakamoto missed the point entirely. The blockchain's value came from its mathematical properties and community consensus, not from the reputation or credentials of any individual creator. In this view, the mystery of Nakamoto's identity was itself a feature rather than a bug, a permanent reminder that truly revolutionary innovations could emerge from anyone, anywhere, at any time. As seasons turned and the seed economy matured into an established part of forest life, the legend of Satoshi Nakamoto evolved from historical puzzle into cultural touchstone. Young creatures grew up hearing bedtime stories about the mysterious benefactor who had freed their parents from the tyranny of sacred leaf banking. The name became synonymous with selfless innovation and the power of individuals to transform entire civilizations through the gift of knowledge. Whether Satoshi Nakamoto was a single genius, a collaborative group, or something else entirely, their legacy was undeniable. The seed economy had not only survived but thrived, proving that decentralized systems could provide security, efficiency, and fairness that surpassed traditional institutions. The creator's greatest achievement wasn't just the technology itself, but the demonstration that ordinary creatures could build extraordinary futures when given the proper tools and freedom to innovate. 10 seasons had passed since the first seed transaction was recorded on the blockchain, and the Whispering Woods bore little resemblance to the forest that had once struggled under the sacred leaf system's limitations. What began as a revolutionary experiment had blossomed into a thriving digital ecosystem that supported forms of commerce and cooperation that previous generations could never have imagined. The old Forest Reserve building still stood within the Mother Oak's massive trunk, but its halls echoed with different purposes now. Some chambers had been converted into blockchain education centers, where young creatures learned programming and cryptography. Others housed archives, preserving the historical transition from centralized to decentralized finance. The distinguished badgers who had once controlled the sacred leaf economy now worked as consultants, helping other forest kingdoms implement their own seed-based systems. Young Hazel, who had grown from a rabbit purchasing clover bundles into a successful blockchain entrepreneur, often reflected on how profoundly her world had changed. Her children played games involving smart contracts and spoke casually about international commerce with forest creatures from distant continents. The economic barriers that had defined her youth, processing fees, banking hours, geographic limitations, seemed as archaic to them as stone tools or cave paintings. The mining operations that had once sparked controversy about environmental impacts had evolved into showcases of sustainable technology. The Beaver family's hydroelectric mining facility had become a model of renewable energy integration, while the Squirrel's wind-powered operation in the Eastern Valley generated enough clean electricity to supply several forest communities. Mining rewards continued to provide economic opportunities for creatures from all backgrounds, creating a more equitable distribution of wealth than the old system had ever achieved. Most remarkably, the principles pioneered in the Whispering Woods had spread far beyond financial applications. Blockchain technology now secured voting systems, supply chain tracking, educational credentials, and countless other aspects of forest civilization. The decentralized approach that had revolutionized money was transforming governance, commerce, and social organization throughout the woodland world. As autumn painted the forest in brilliant colors once again, the creatures of the Whispering Woods looked toward a future bright with possibility. They had learned that revolutionary change was possible when communities came together around shared principles of fairness, transparency, and cooperation. The seeds planted by the mysterious Satoshi Nakamoto had grown into a forest of opportunities that would continue expanding for generations to come. The greatest lesson of the seed revolution wasn't technological, but philosophical. That ordinary creatures, working together with good intentions and innovative tools, could build economic systems more just, efficient, and sustainable than anything imposed by centralized authorities. In proving this principle, the Whispering Woods had planted seeds of transformation that would sprout in countless other communities, each adapting the core innovations to their unique needs and circumstances. The digital forest had taught its inhabitants that the future belonged not to those who hoarded power, but to those who shared knowledge. And in that sharing, in that open collaboration between creatures of all species and backgrounds, lay the true promise of the blockchain revolution. A promise that extended far beyond any single technology or economic system, reaching toward a world where cooperation could triumph over control, where innovation could emerge from anywhere, and where the seeds of positive change could take root in even the most unlikely soil. The story of cryptocurrency, as told through the lens of forest economics, revealed itself to be ultimately a story about trust, community, and the power of collective action to create better futures. In the Whispering Woods, those futures had already begun. The digital forest was never just a story about woodland creatures and their economic revolution. It was a mirror, reflecting our own world's greatest financial transformation. A transformation that's still unfolding around us every single day. The sacred leaves? They're our traditional banking system. The seeds? They're Bitcoin, Ethereum, and thousands of other cryptocurrencies. The mysterious Satoshi Nakamoto? That's Satoshi Nakamoto, whose true identity remains unknown even as their creation has grown to be worth trillions. The forest creatures who questioned their monetary system and dared to build something better? Those are the developers, miners, investors, and everyday people who are reshaping money itself. You now understand not just what cryptocurrency is, but why it exists and how it works. More importantly, you understand why this story isn't ending. It's just beginning. The question now isn't whether this revolution will continue, but what role you'll play in it. The digital forest has shown you the possibilities. The rest is up to you.